Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm Steve Knox, and the last year to 18 months has really thrown the world into some radical change. And one of those big changes that occurred was this moving to remote working. In other words, if you could do it, most people who could do it were sent home to work from home. A lot of businesses may have been considering that for a while, but maybe weren't quite ready to pull the trigger on it yet, and then we're kind of forced to because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we get back to normal, it's going to be a major change. We're going to see if people are going to be going back to work in the offices, what's going to happen with commercial real estate. And to discuss all of that with us is turnaround specialist, serial entrepreneur, and the author of Remote Work for a Better World, Mr. John Paul Mendocha. Sir, welcome to Talk of the Town.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on. It has been an interesting period of time. It's been, a year and a half now that most people who were sent home, many of them still working from home, at least for the majority of their time, although you see some companies are starting to slowly bring people back to work. Do you see this as being a long-term modification in how we work?
I do. I see it as not only is it a change, but a lot of companies found out that their productivity in many areas went up, and that was a good thing. Also, people found that if they could get used to it, and I know it doesn't, one size doesn't fit all, but as they got used to it, that their lifestyle improved. In fact, there's a lot of people who moved to more remote areas just so they could work and have a different lifestyle. So I do think it's a long-term trend. It makes so much sense. Technology, even though we have a tendency to believe that it is so advanced today, we have no idea what it's going to be like in 10 or 15 years, and it's only going to get better for remote work.
And let's talk about some of the reasons why many businesses were so reticent to do this prior to the pandemic. Many employers, I know, we're kind of stuck in this old-fashioned mindset. If you have to be in the office, we need you here from 8:30 to 5 every day. We want to see you at your desk. And as we found out, and I kind of had a job like that where I was on when I was traveling, I was going across the country and doing sales presentations and things like that. But when I was back in town, I had to be in the office during those hours, even though the hours of the people that I was trying to sell to, it was on the West Coast and I was living on the East Coast. But no, they want to be there at 8:30 in the morning every day, and I had to be there. But that's kind of that old-fashioned mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, at one point in time when we were all seeing the Industrial Revolution and, we had the steam engine and we all got around the steam engine and did whatever we did, it just made sense that you had to have people there. If they weren't there, if it was out of sight, out of mind, how can you trust them? In fact, I just had that discussion with a client of mine last week because we hired a researcher and she is definitely remote. And he goes, well, how in the world are we going to keep track of her time as if this is the first time I've seen this? And I said, well, it's simple. If we don't trust her, then why are we hiring her? Two, if she puts in an inordinate amount of time, we'll know because her output won't match that. And the third thing is that you have to build systems to keep track of people. And if you do those things, because let's face it, Steve, if you don't trust somebody, why in the world would you hire them in the first place? But yeah, we still have those trepidations, and maybe it's because it's a reflection in ourselves of thinking, well, if the boss wasn't looking, would I be goofing off kind of thing, which I think is a throwback to a different time.
It really is, and it's my wife has been working remotely during this entire thing, and she still does, and she's got a great setup in her office, and she's attending the meetings and meeting with the clients and doing all the stuff that she's supposed to do. And, she's actually putting in a full day's work without having to waste the time commuting. And, at times, some of that socializing maybe that would normally happen to take time away from people isn't happening. So there is a trade-off here.
Well, there is a trade-off, and I think you need. I'm still an old school believer that you need to meet people face to face. It's just that I think that if you are marking time, if you have that kind of mindset, then what you do is you're missing the point of people who are working with information and data. Information and data is much more pliable. It deals with different time frames. I'm talking to you, and we're separated by a continent, and I'm sitting in my office in my house. In fact, I've been doing remote work for a very long time, and I did that by choice because I found out that I was just, moving files back and forth. I was in sales and said, this is nuts. So that happened. There are a couple of things that are going to have to change if this is going to be a long-term trend. And I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but there's just some things that people have to do if they're going to make themselves really productive and competitive.
Now, I'd like to get into some of the details on it, but it's interesting when it comes to hiring people, and you talked about being able to see when people are working and not working, and there were a few people under my wife who had to have some serious conversations with and let them know, look, you have a job to do here, and I can tell you're not doing it. And one particular person actually had to be let go because they simply were not capable of doing that job remotely.
Well, exactly. And what you need to do is build in a system that it's easy if you're a manager and all you have to do is look out in the bullpen and see if somebody's working or not, or, watch somebody who takes 9 breaks in, a day or something. It's easy to see that. You have to build in a system. So if you have a system of how you keep track of somebody remotely, and I have talked about this on several occasions. Let me give you just one quick tip. You have somebody who you depend upon who works remotely. You set up a daily call. You call them up, and you have a limited time, and you say, okay, let's get organized. Let's find out what we're doing. And you roll through that. You have a little bit of give and take, so you have some socialization going on. But really, it forces you to become more organized yourself. And that's really the key. And if you do that, what you'll find out is that oftentimes people will say, oh, I now understand what I need to do. I now understand what has to take place. And you have to keep track of them. And that's a key thing. And by the way, if it doesn't fit them for whatever reason they can't do it, then you have to be honest with them and say, I don't think you have the personality or, and again, try to be very nice, but, it's not going to fit. It's not going to work for you.
And the development of so many tools that we were using, I know before this pandemic hit, I had never heard of Zoom. And very quickly, within like a couple of weeks, everybody was using Zoom. It was just an amazing thing to watch. But companies like Microsoft and other companies like that have kind of gotten into the game and have developed tools and have really quickly modified and adapted those tools to this new kind of idea.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of tools to pick, and what I suggest is that somebody pick a tool that they're comfortable with. I have used, as a consultant, I have been pitched many of these tools from years ago. I mean, it's interesting how these things became overnight sensations, as you say, even though they've been around for many years, in some cases, over a decade and a half. The key is to find something that you can actually make work for you, and then become an expert. Understand that it is not going to be easy. I love to watch cable news and have the talking heads and have the remote person who can't figure out how to run whatever they need to run. And I'm just sitting there going, you couldn't do a preliminary call. You couldn't do that. When the pandemic hit, I ended up speaking to a group of entrepreneurs in Peru. And they had a checklist that they sent me. That was in Spanish, so we had to work through that. But what they explained to me is that because Peru has limited bandwidth, it has these things, they had a very detailed checklist. I have yet to have somebody in North America, U.S. or Canada, ever send me something that extensive, because we just assume this is going to work. And I've seen so many glitches that it doesn't matter which channel you happen to be watching, but you'll see the person like freeze up or something happens, and they have no idea why it happened other than blame the computer. Well, you need to know how to operate the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also a different type of protocol, I think, when you're doing those kinds of meetings and when you're doing a face-to-face, in-person kind of presentation. And as I mentioned, I was in sales, and I lived on the East Coast, but most of my clients or prospective clients were on the West Coast all the way out to Alaska. And I did, in the last few years of my working in that industry, I would say I did probably 90% of my sales were done through a web presentation. And
right.
I had become kind of an expert in doing web presentations because I'd done so many of them and learned what worked and what didn't. And I've also seen other people do them where they don't understand that this is different. You can get 6 people in a room together and be in person and maybe have a 4 or 5 hour conversation. You can't do that on a web meeting.
Right, and you have to understand things like production values, and you have to understand that, if you have a clothes, laundry basket behind you, or in one case, I had somebody who brought me into a $1 billion company, and his 11-year-old son bombed in on us because he thought it would be funny and clever, and it's like, and I said to the guy, I said, we have to talk about this when we're talking to the client, and they're a $1 billion company. Under no circumstance should you have your 11-year-old who thinks it's funny dive in and think it's going to be clever and funny. I mean, we're not doing that kind of show. We're doing a different kind of show.
Yeah, and we've seen how many examples of that go viral over the past year or so. Even one just yesterday where somebody was taking a nap who was supposed to be attending some sort of like board of aldermen meeting or something somewhere, and he was sleeping in his underwear while on camera. And I think probably one of the more famous ones that came out before this whole pandemic was the guy who was given the interview on television, and his kid comes bouncing into the room, and the housekeeper or whatever had to go in and kind of drag the kid out of the room, and the guy's still trying to maintain some sense of decorum during the interview. It does happen, but again, I think a lot of people have also kind of come to realize that it happens. Let it slide. Don't make a big deal out of it too.
Right, and you just have to understand that. And this is the part when you tell me that as a salesperson how the landscape has changed. It absolutely has. I tell people every time I can, you're doing a performance. So when you're on Zoom, you're doing a performance. Do things like, here's a tip for everybody out there. It's something that I actually got from my very first job in a call center, which is before you start your shift, you go brush your teeth. And I looked at the guy who was the top of the heap of this call center, Roger, and I said, Roger, what does it have to matter if I'm brushing my teeth, I'm on the phone? And he goes, well, because you have fresh breath, don't you?
Yeah.
And it was just, and it stuck with me, and it's just, but it works for Zoom. If you're going to go do that, go out there, splash a little water on your face, get ready, and just understand that you're on. It's showtime, and if you do that, you'll have a much better experience, and you'll take it more seriously. And I think that's the other part of it, is that you have to know that this is your job, this is your livelihood. Take it seriously when you're doing a Zoom call, when you're doing remote work, and most importantly is that you should be self-aware of what you look like on camera. And if you're not, then you got a problem.
Well, and the other thing, a lot of people have kind of become lazy. They'll wear a jacket and tie and then have just a pair of shorts on because they don't think that's going to show up on camera. And then what happens is maybe the camera slips or something happens, and you have to stand up immediately, and all of a sudden your whole illusion is blown. So
yeah, yeah. You do want to learn how to turn off the video. That's the other thing. I was speaking with a client, and I were making a presentation to a very prestigious university, and these guys did not know how to turn off their video feed.
Oof.
And it was like embarrassing to watch the clients just doing things, and it was like you guys, you understand you're on a hot mic and a hot video feed.
Yeah.
Do you understand that?
Maybe somebody should have told Jeff Toobin that. Now, while we're in this mode of kind of just trying to maintain and stay in business here and adapting to this new way of working, many businesses are still attempting to sort of grow and maybe move into new markets and things like that. Is that possible while having, being 100% remote?
Well, I think it is. I think part of it is the fact that the more you can touch customers, the better things are. And I'll give you an example of a situation I'm working on right now, helping a business to grow. Is that all of their sales staff? Now we're combining old school with new school. Is that every time they have a presentation, a conversation, something that is a milestone, is that they're sending out handwritten thank you cards. And I said, we'll buy you stacks of cards and a bunch of stamps and handwrite them, send them out. Have to send them out the same day. By the way, it's a great way to keep track of people. And the response from the customer side, because remember they're remote too. A lot of customers are now working remote. Is that they are blown away because they're getting less and less and less in this metal box by the front of the property than they've ever gotten. But then they get this handwritten thank you card, and the response is quite amazing. In fact, we have developed a pricing power model based upon those kind of soft touches that we've put into the system, and that business is growing.
You made me think, too, of another aspect of this, and that is, while we just can assume that, a businessman is going to make a presentation, a sales presentation, a training presentation, whatever, that people at the other end have the time to sit in front of their computer for X number of hours to go through this. And that's not necessarily always the case, especially if you're in sales. You may have to be walking along with someone while they're walking through the factory floor, actually doing their job while making your presentation. So you kind of have to, I think, modify your expectations a little bit depending on the situation, because some people simply just don't have the time to sit in front of a computer for a couple hours.
Oh, and I agree with you. That is accurate. Again, this has been going on for quite some time. What I always say is if you can't do your presentation in 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, if you can't figure out how to break it into pieces. And something I learned from a friend of mine who writes sitcoms is he goes, listen, John, if you can write a 2-minute bit, and you can consistently write a 2-minute bit that fits into a show, and you can deliver like 2 of those a month, you can go and get on a writing staff because it's so hard to find 2 minutes. Go write your 2-minute piece. Go write what you need to say in 2 minutes, and understand that you only have that. Time yourself and know that you only have 2 minutes to do it. And what happens is that then when somebody's walking on the factory floor, you can do that. Also be prepared that wherever they stop you, that you can then back up and go back, and you can cover those points again and be very precise about it. But most importantly, you have to be ready to take that piece of business at any point in time. Big mistake today is that people will say, oh, great, so you're ready to order? Well, go to this website. Bad idea.
Yep.
Terminating the conversation and hoping they go out and find us and don't forget about you. I mean, people can't even remember what they just clicked on 30 seconds ago, let alone they're going to remember what you just said. Make sure that you make it as easy as possible and reduce the friction and get them to do the deal.
Well, that was one of the things. I mean, that's just the basic sales technique. When somebody says yes, stop selling.
Oh, but how many of the I 100% right, Steve. But how many times have I been on a Zoom presentation where, okay, we're there, okay, let's go, and the guy goes, okay, and then, well, we discovered that the land masses moved, and then what are you talking about?
Yeah, let me just show you a few more things here, and no, you're done. I tell the story occasionally on the show here. I wanted to buy a car a bunch of years back, and I'd done all of my research and went online and scoped out and figured out I want this one car. This is the car that I want. And before I was going to actually sign the paperwork, all I wanted to do was test drive that car just to see if I liked the way it rode. And I went to the car dealer, and this kid sat me down. Well, before I take you out to the car, let me tell you about some of the things. I'm like, look, I already know. I already did my research. And so then he brings me out to the car, and he starts doing things like tapping on the headlights going, check that out, bulletproof glass. And I'm going, okay, big deal. And look at that engine. It's he said things like the engine liner that's on the top of on the trunk or on the hood is specifically designed that in the case of a engine fire, they melt quickly and drop and snuff out the fire. And I said, so you have a problem with engine fires on the model here? And then he goes, well, and it's got 8 cylinders. I said, yeah. He goes, how many spark plugs do you think that is? And I said, 8? He goes, no, there's 2 per cylinder. So I said, oh, so tune-ups are going to be super expensive, right? So as we go through all of this stuff, and all I told him is I just wanted to drive the car. I told him exactly what I wanted. I wanted red, I wanted this, I wanted that, and I just want to drive the car. He talked me out of that car. I literally bought a totally different vehicle.
Well, but he did complete the presentation.
Yes.
And I'm sure when he filled out his sheet that he handed into his manager, and his manager said, did you tell him about the fire retardant built into the hood of the car? Did you tell him that? Oh, you did. Good. All right.
You made your metric.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, be careful what you measure because you might have to live with it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was just, and I was in sales at the time, and the whole time I'm looking at this kid going, dude, stop. Stop.
Yeah, That is a great story, and it's just an example. And those are the things that you may not pick up when you're on a Zoom call, which is why part of when you're building a presentation for a big group of people, and it's called death by PowerPoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've all been through it. Where we start signing a suicide pact and wanting to drink Kool-Aid because the guy's got more slides. If they can't pick it up inside the room, they really have a hard time in Zoom. So one of the things that we work on, I would suggest everybody do, is every so many slides have a point where you essentially can break out and end it if you need to, and go to the end and get to the end and get it done. Now, just because a meeting is scheduled for an hour doesn't mean that you have to take an hour. You can actually, if you're done in so many minutes, you're done. You move on. Life gets good. But it's the mistake that people make all the time is they go, well, no, I've got an hour. I'm going to take an hour.
Yeah, I used to work with a guy like that would, he would just go into every single detail of our software, and I'm just like, man, hit the high points. Just hit the high points and move on. But it's something you need to really train on. It's something you need, if you're a manager too, and you see people doing this, maybe sit in on some of these Zoom presentations with them and critique each other, right? That was one of the things that I did at my last job is afterwards I would tell people, okay, look, here's what you did right, here's what you did wrong. You got to learn and modify your presentations, I think, and that's constantly has to be happening.
And if you're a small business owner and you're trying to grow the business, one of the things that you need to understand is how do you quickly get to why they called. I mean, it's great to talk about the weather. It's great to talk about the sports team. It's great to talk about whatever. But why are they calling? And I've worked with like auto repair shops, and it's amazing that they never get to why somebody calls, right? People don't call an auto repair shop. Well, maybe some of you do, but I don't. But I don't call an auto repair shop just to say, what did you think about the game on Sunday? I'm calling because a red light is on, and my wife says you got to take it in, and no, you can't paste electrical tape over the light. So that's why I've got to call. And it just astonishes me. And I've worked with many of these shops, and it was like, just get them to that decision point and get them to bring the car in, unless you do some kind of healing on the phone of the repair. They've got to bring the car in. Same thing with plumbers and HVAC. I can't tell you how many people say, well, do you know exactly what kind of toilet it is? Yeah, non-functional.
Yeah, I think that's aren't you the expert? Yeah,
exactly.
So, final thing, John, I want to talk to you a little bit about is this is going to really disrupt the commercial real estate world as we go forward, because I think a lot of businesses have realized that if their staff can be just as productive without working from home, they don't need that big monster footprint. New York City is still looking at many businesses just refusing to come back and not needing the space they have there anymore because they realize it's counterproductive to expect people to have to commute into work and spend all that time, and when they can get more work out of them by not putting them through that process and actually maybe have happier employees. Do you think that this is going to be something that as businesses change the way they're putting people out there, that there's going to be some pushback from employees when they're saying, well, listen, we're providing the internet service, we're providing the heat, we're providing the light, what am I getting compensated for other than the fact that I don't have to go to the office?
Well, yeah, I think it's going to be a balancing. Let's talk about commercial real estate first. Commercial real estate is going to see some serious pressure on it. It's already been happening. It's been happening for some period of time. And in fact, a lot of this change has been stifled, if you will, because if somebody has 20,000 square feet, they want to fill 20,000 square feet. I don't want to have everybody hanging out at home. What am I paying for all this empty space for? On the other side, as far as employees, and we were, let me just touch on a second, is that if you want your employees to be really productive, or your people to be really productive at home, is that you need to figure out the package. And the package has to be, how fast does the internet have to be? By the way, most people have no clue of how fast their internet is or should be. Second thing is that you have to figure out how they're going to build the space that they can work out of. And then the third thing is that they need technology that is fairly new technology. we have this sense right now that, good enough, it's good enough, we're okay. But really, what you need is if somebody's going to be working from their house, is they may need an upgrade in technology. In fact, you should plan on it. Was talking to someone about their team, and the client said, well, John, we just don't have the great results, and it's probably Zoom. And I said, well, it's not Zoom. It's the fact that you have 11 people in the field, and no one has the same internet speeds, including you. So what you need to do is you need to probably pay for that additional speed, and that's what I think how you cover employees feeling like they're getting compensated. And it's more of a, do you cover part of the infrastructure? Do you put in faster internet, which everybody should do? And then more importantly, do you go out and get remote help for them? Because one of the biggest things that burns lots of productivity is somebody is staring at a computer. It's not doing what you think it should be doing. Things aren't working, and they have no person to call. So they're trying to diagnose the problem. If they can barely do their job, how are they going to be the high-tech person? So fix that. And I think that will quell lots of people's sense that I'm not getting compensated for it. Listen, if I don't have to drive back and forth and spend 20, 30, 40 an hour in the car every day, both ways, fight traffic and all of that, give me a high-speed internet, make sure that we have everything set up, and I'll probably be much happier. There is a process, and again, lots of people, because they're working at home for the first time and they were forced to it, unlike myself who went for that as an option, do not understand that they are working. And that's a kind of a orientation that we have to do. Sounds like you always work remote. You live by my rule. So if you were in Connecticut and your customers were a couple time zones away, I mean you had to deal with that time disparity. Lots of little things like that. If you teach and show your employees, your people, your partners, your vendors how to do this, you're going to get better results. And I believe it is going to change, and it's going to change for a long time, because right now I have a company that I've invested in, and I've worked with them. We just hit 20 years. We're a virtual company. When we started as a virtual company, essentially virtual meant that you had a brother-in-law in a different state, and we get very complex engineering tasks done. And it took a lot of explaining. But now clients and customers don't want to pay for that overhead. And what they want is they want the result.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting time. And it's been really fascinating to watch what's happened, again, with my wife and her company. And I think they're probably going to start bringing people back into the office, but give them the option of working from home a couple of days a week, because there's just some things that can't get done remotely. But I think overall, right, you're absolutely right. This is going to change so much of what we expect out of our employees, out of our employers. And it's also going to be fascinating. It's a whole different topic we don't have time to get into. But when the IRS steps up and starts looking at some of these things, if businesses are paying for internet, well, then that suddenly becomes an expense that they can write off, which if someone's at home paying for their own internet, they can't. So how's that going to modify over time as we go to this new model? So, Mr. Mendocha, tell us a little bit about your book, Remote Work for a Better World.
So Remote Work for a Better World was written because I was in the process of launching my first book, which is most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it, Position to Win. And as I was in the process of launching that last year, this whole pandemic hit. I assembled a group of experts that I know. We put together Remote Work for a Better World and published it within 17 days. It's available on Amazon, and it's still at 99 cents. I believe that you'll learn a lot about some of the things you can do to make it better. You can go to positiontowinbook.com, find a lot of other great materials. There's some freebies for all of your listeners, and they'll get to see some of the other things I do. Frankly, I did Remote Work for a Better World for a simple reason. I knew that this was going to be a giant difficulty, pain in the neck. I'll make sure that I say kind words about it without swearing. But and I've watched it, and I know some fairly high up people, and when I watch them do very poor interviews, I send out little notes to them, little love notes, and say, look, you got to read the book because you need to get better at this, and you have to understand what you need to do. Last little tidbit for everybody is understand, since it is a performance, You want to learn how to build essentially a studio in your house. If you do that and you actually get really good at it, I mean, obviously Steve has a great broadcast voice, but if you think, geez, I don't know if I can do this, I don't know. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And if you get good at it, here's the thing. There's going to be a differentiation going forward, and that differentiation or that bifurcation that's going to happen is those who are really good at doing remote work are going to be able to find jobs and find gigs that they never thought they were going to find at a pay level that they never thought was possible, and be able to do it remote. Just have a coaching client just the other day. He's in the process of getting a $150,000 a year job, and the entire thing is remote. And they're going to have them fly in, once a quarter, maybe once a month. But think about that when and again, I don't know how old you are, Steve, but in the days of yore, if I had heard about that job, I would have thought that it was available on Candy Island with unicorns, because that didn't exist, but it does today.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's going to open up the door to so many more opportunities to people when we do this. So, Paul Mendocha, again, the book is called Remote Work for a Better World. I think we've learned a lot over the last 18, 16 months, but I think there's still a lot more to go. And tips like this, I hopefully will be helpful for anybody who is experiencing this right now. I want to thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you, and wish your audience the best of luck. Take care.
Take care.